Well, welcome to our newest psychological health talk. We're going to talk about habits today. This is a very complex topic. I'm going to try to make it simple enough that we can have some basic understandings. There are certainly many things to cover, more than we can cover in a half an hour talk. If you want a much more in-depth look at how to develop and integrate habits, there's a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear that's a good guide that is very practical. But I want to warn you, psychologists have been studying habits since the early 1920s, and so we've got a lot of information, more information than we're going to cover today, but we'll get into it. So just a review, we've been looking at the basics of behavior change, and this is the fourth segment of that basic approach to how we make a change in our behavior that is both effective and lasting. So we started off by talking about embracing a healthy identity. Our identity helps us to make choices, and it becomes a really important part of how we integrate things into our lives. We then looked at developing a plan for being healthier, and we looked at a health possibilities assessment to be able to take a look at what, in fact, helps us to identify that we're on a healthy track. Last week we talked about finding the right guides. Experts are very important, but they're not the only element to making long-lasting change. But when we're faced with an environment like we're in right now, finding a right guide can be important. Today we're going to talk about the final piece in the puzzle of making a lasting behavior change. So if you establish a healthy identity, if you have a really effective idea, a plan for where you're headed, you've found the right guides, and you've got the right kind of expert advice, habits are essential. And we're going to talk a little bit about why habits are so essential, because none of the other three are going to be able to stick without us making habits. And here's why. So habits are essentially those things that we do in our lives that happen without conscious awareness. I'd like to start off by telling you about something that helped me to clarify it. So this was many years ago, and we're going to talk about how long ago it was in just a minute. I was working with a client, and this particular client was supplying sports equipment to different teams. So he would do high school teams, he would do college teams, and he was doing a few pro teams that he would visit on a regular basis to make sure that they had the right equipment and the most up-to-date equipment. So he told me that he was talking to the head coach of the then World Championship Chicago Bears in the NFL. Now the last time the Chicago Bears won a Super Bowl and were world champions was 1985. So this was quite a while ago. He said he went up to Coach Mike Ditka, who was the coach at the time, and he said, "Coach Ditka, I don't understand. He said, you've got all pros who are world champions, and I noticed that you do the same blocking and tackling drills that they do in college and even in high school." And he said, Ditka just smiled, shook his head and laughed, and he said, "Here's what you don't understand. I have all pros that get so nervous before a game that if we don't practice every day what we need to do, they'll forget to do it." Now, that highlights how important habitual behaviors are. Habitual behaviors, first of all, have to be well practiced. We don't choose to say, I want this to become a habit and it automatically happens. We have to practice it. We have to practice it repeatedly. And when we do, then those behaviors occur even when we're under incredible stress, and even when we have to pay attention to other things. And let me give you a kind of a framework for how this works. So there was a guy who once figured out, probably some guy who didn't have enough to do, once figured out that we have about 16 billion bits of information that we can pay attention to at any time. It's hard to imagine what a billion is, so I put all the zeros behind it so that you can see how large this number actually is. We underappreciate how big that is. So this is, sights, sounds, sensations in our bodies, thoughts that we're having, but there's an incredible amount of information that is available to us. On a conscious level, we can pay attention to approximately 7 bits of information, plus or minus 2. Some people only pay attention to 5 bits. Some people who really train to pay attention consciously can get that up to around 9 bits of information. You can see that there's quite a gap between those two things. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't function in the world, because if we were limited to only what we pay conscious attention to, we would be pretty useless. We breathe without having to pay conscious attention to it. Our heart beats on a steady basis and our brain regulates that. We're able to function in a world where there's lights and sounds that we can push into the background so that we can pay attention to the thing that we choose to pay attention to. There's all kinds of things that are going on that take up some of that 16 billion bits of information. Not that we're processing all of that, we're not, but the essential pieces get processed, and the way they get processed is through habit. So if we don't have habits, we essentially can't function. And that was the insight that Coach Ditka was telling my client when he was talking about why they practice the same blocking and tackling drills that most of those professional athletes had practiced at least since high school. Because when we are engaged in a habitual behavior, that behavior can occur without us having to take away bits of our conscious attention to direct to that, and instead we can use that conscious attention for something else. Now, that explains why education isn't enough to make sustained behavior change. So if you go to your doctor and your doctor says you need to manage your stress, control your weight by eating a better diet and exercise and sleep well, and get good support from people around you, knowing that doesn't automatically translate into doing those things, because we have lots of things that are occupying our day on a day-to-day basis. If you're at home with your family, you've got family responsibilities, maybe kids that need your attention, or you're interacting with your romantic partner, or you're trying to get the dishes done, or whatever. You've got lots of things that are occupying your conscious attention. In order to be able to effectively change behavior, we have to have some things that occur because they're automatic, not because we have to remember to do them each time. So there are 4 things that we can do that can increase the probability that we can engage in such a way that we develop and integrate positive habits into our life. Now, we've developed and integrated many habits into our life, whether or not they're positive or not. And so these are ways that habits develop to make sure that we're developing habits that are beneficial to us, we need to engage these four qualities and make sure that we engage in regular practice of these four qualities so that the habits that we're choosing become a part of our daily life. And I'm going to use some examples, some of them drawn from my own life, to help you to understand why these are important. The first thing we need to do is make sure that when we're trying to develop and integrate a habit into our life, we make it obvious. This is in part because of that balance between the 16 billion bits of information we could pay attention to and the 7 bits of information that we have conscious ability to pay attention to at any time. So there's all kinds of things that are going on in our lives that we're not actually paying attention to. We see this with some of the research that's done on memory, and in particular, if we look at observational attention. There was a study that was done by a psychologist by the name of Elizabeth Loftus, who showed her students a short video clip, and the video clip was of a car that got into an accident. And they watched the video clip as a group, and then afterwards she asked them some questions. And she asked them, among the questions, did the person stop for a stop sign? Well, when you went through the video, if you were alerted to this, you could see that there was no stop sign. But the question, did the person stop for a stop sign, caused people to think that there was a stop sign there. Because when we're observing things, we kind of fill in gaps. We don't see everything. So in order to create a habit, we first have to make it obvious. If I'm not obviously doing this, then it doesn't become part of my repertoire. And we see this, so sometimes people are asking me, how do I develop a habit of meditating? And while meditation in itself is a very conscious action, the habit of doing it gets to be an issue. And part of the reason for that is that it's not part of their daily life. So they say, I'm gonna meditate every day. Most often, they'll meditate the day that they say that. The next day, if they haven't made it obvious what they're going to do, their life takes hold and they're doing different things and they forget. And so at the end of a week, and I've taught meditation classes for long enough that I've seen this over and over again, end of a week, they've meditated twice during a 7-day period of time because they forgot the other 5 days. Not because they're not wanting to do it, not because they're not motivated to do it, but because it wasn't obvious to them when to do it. So one of the things that makes a habit obvious is to say, okay, I need to have a time that I do it. That's a regular time, so that when that time comes along, it becomes obvious to me that I should do it. I'll give you an example from my own life. I try to exercise, and I'm pretty good at exercising 5 days a week. Being an older person, not only is that valuable for me, but I want to have a couple of days where I can recover, because my body doesn't recover as well as it did when I was in my 20s and 30s. But one of the things that I do is that I've got a nice piece of exercise equipment at home. So when I get up in the morning and I go into the bathroom to get my teeth brushed and all of those kinds of early morning things, I have my exercise clothes right in the bathroom. And I put them on right away. One of the things that does is it makes it obvious for me that I'm going to exercise. So if I sit down, as I ordinarily do, look at are there any emails that came in overnight that I need to pay attention to? I'm going to do a little professional reading. But then it's obvious to me that I'm still going to exercise because I got my exercise clothes on. If I don't put my exercise clothes on, it's harder to remember to do it. So making a habit obvious is the first effort that we want to make if we're going to start to develop and integrate a good, positive habit into my life. The second thing we want to do is we want to make it attractive. We want to make it so that it's something that is something we want to do. Now, that becomes a bit of an issue, particularly when we think of trying to create some of the positive habits. One of the things that we see in our American diet is that many of the processed food companies have worked really hard at figuring out how to make their processed foods attractive. So they work on packaging, making sure the packaging is packaging that's easy to spot, obvious, attractive to us. They work on taste. If you look at the lists of ingredients of processed foods, there's a lot of ingredients on there that you can't pronounce. That's because they've spent a lot of time working on chemical reactions that give us a kind of a taste that we find attractive and pleasant. And that makes it easier for us to want to choose that processed food. They do a couple of other things that we'll get into further on. But one of the things that then we need to do is to make sure that as we're trying to integrate a habit into our lives, we find a way to make it attractive. One of the things that I learned when I was starting to try to make exercise a regular habit in my life was that what I first did was I would set a goal. So if I was going to try jogging, which was one of the first ways that I tried to integrate that habit into my life, I'd set a goal that I wanted to be able to run 3 miles without stopping. And so I go out the first day, and you can't do that if you're just starting out, but I work at it, get it up to the point where I could comfortably run 3 miles without stopping. Then something happened to me that it took me a long time to kind of get my arms around. I didn't like running. So when I got to the 3 mile goal that I had set for myself, I congratulated myself. I did it, I finished it, I got to my goal, and then I would stop. And then all of my conditioning would go away. And I would say, oh my God, I need to do this again. And I would start over again. And I became what I called a serial exerciser. So I would start, accomplish my goals, stop. Later on, I'd start again, accomplish my goals, stop. And I did this for more years than I'd like to admit. The change that I needed to make was I stopped setting goals and started paying attention to the fact that when I regularly exercise on my exercise equipment, do my weightlifting and things like that, I find that I like the way that it feels throughout the day. And I would pay attention to that. It made it attractive to me to do this because I liked the way that it made me feel. There are lots of different ways that we can create opportunities to make our positive habits attractive to us. And it's worth taking some time to figure that out for yourself. So take the time to do that for yourself. Find ways to, whatever it is you might be trying to do, whether you're doing some more reading to educate yourself more, or exercise. If you're eating healthier foods, take the time to find the recipes that make those healthy foods really taste good, so that you are attracted to what it is that you're doing. You're not just doing it, and kind of enduring it because you know that eventually it'll be good for you. The fact is that we don't sustain things if the goal is too far in the future. We have to be able to say, no, I'm doing it because not only will I benefit in the future, but I like the way that it makes me feel now. I like the way that this is integrated into my life now. And that helps us to be able to sustain that for a longer period of time. The third area is to make it easy. We've got an obvious habit, we've made it attractive. It also needs to be easy to do. So if you've got a choice, we're going to use the healthy food options to kind of illustrate this. If you've got a choice between picking up a bag of chips, then all you have to do is open it and eat it, or you have to bring out some celery and some carrots, and you have to chop those up, skin them off a little bit, get them all set up for yourself. It's easier to pick the processed food. And again, people who are in the processed food industry understand the psychology of this. And they work very hard to make their options easy to choose. One of the things that helps people to be able to eliminate many junk foods is to simply not have it in your house. If it's in your house, it's easy to choose. If you have to leave, go out and get it and bring it home in order to be able to eat it, you're much less likely to do that. Now, it doesn't mean that you'll never do that, but it means that it's less likely because we like to choose easy options. And from a biological standpoint, that actually makes sense. So one of the things that is true of any biological organism is that we have limited amounts of energy. And so conserving energy is something that we want to do for ourselves in order to be able to survive. And expending excess energy on things that are hard to do requires that we need a really good reason to be able to do something that's hard. And oftentimes we'll choose the easier option if we can. That's not, we call that being lazy, but it's really built into the biological system. And this is true not just for human beings, it's true for other species as well. Easy is a preferred option if the two choices are close to each other. So if you wanted to have celery and lettuce and carrots as an option, one of the things that would be a good idea to do is to have some that are regularly pre-prepared for yourself. So that when you're hungry, it's an easy option to choose. When you're wanting to exercise, it's easy to do because you already have your exercise clothes on. If you're planning to be in bed at a reasonable time, you've taken the time to organize your evening so that you're not trying to rush and get one more thing done before it's time to go to bed. It's easy to make that choice because the systems you have in your life foster that possibility. So that's the third area. The fourth area is that you want to make it satisfying. So there's something good about a healthy habit, a positive habit, that when you accomplish it, it feels like you've accomplished something important. you have the opportunity to feel satisfied that you did it. This is a difference. So I've talked to some people who, what they do to engage with something that's healthier for themselves, they view as an obligation. And when the obligation is done, they check that obligation off the list and they go on to the next obligation. Well, one of the things that happens when you do that is that you lose the momentum of the habit. If the habit that you're engaging in is satisfying, then you look forward to the next time that you do it. If it's viewed only as an obligation, then you might be able to do it some of the time with sheer motivation. But motivation, willpower, isn't sufficient for creating and sustaining a habit over the long term. In fact, willpower is a diminishing resource. So there was a study that was done in which they wanted to have people work on a hard set of math problems, and what they did is they brought them in, divided them into the control group, the research study participants, and the people that were going to be engaged in the experiment. And so they brought them into a waiting room. In the waiting room, they made them wait for about 30 minutes before they brought them in to do the math exam, which was going to require some level of effort. It was going to require that people put some willpower into it. In one of the groups, they waited in the waiting room, and the waiting room was pleasantly lit, and it was relaxing, and there was some soothing music on. In the other waiting room, they had, and this was the experimental group, they had a plate of cookies, and they made sure the cookies were fresh so that they had the aroma of cookies in the waiting room. But they instructed them, these cookies aren't for you. These are for the next group that's coming in. So I apologize for having the cookies here, but you can't take any of them. Well, that required some willpower. What they found was that those individuals who had to use willpower to resist the cookies actually gave up on their math exam much sooner than those who had a soothing, quiet, pleasant place where they didn't have to expend any willpower. And so they were able to sustain their effort on the math exam for a longer period of time. So that one of the things that moving from obligation to something that we find satisfying does is it removes the need to engage willpower in order to engage with the habit. We begin to want to do the thing that is good for us because we see it as beneficial for us. Sometimes that means that we slow down, and this is particularly true if you're trying to eat a healthy diet. Good food has subtle tastes. If you slow down, it's more satisfying than if you eat it quickly. Fast food has very strong tastes. You can eat it very quickly, and it turns out that rapid eating doesn't have much of an impact. But slowing down to savor what you're doing creates a more satisfying experience. For me, the exercise was more satisfying because I really like the way I feel when I've completed an exercise episode in my life. And so over time, I've come to really enjoy it. And if there's something that happens during a day that I normally exercise that I can't get to exercise, not only do I notice it, but I miss the satisfying feeling of engaging with the exercise, or meditating, or many of the other things that we might do that we consider to be habits that make a difference for us. So as you're thinking about creating habits, remember, you want them to be obvious, you want them to be attractive, you want them to be easy, you want them to be satisfying, so that you can engage in these healthy behaviors without having to consciously attend to everything you're doing. And that frees up your attention to be able to focus on other things that are important. Please take some time to watch this, like it if you enjoy it, share it with your friends. We'd like to get many more views of these psychological health talks. Next week we'll be talking about the Foundations of Healthy Living, a program that we've developed here at Stress Management and Mental Health Clinics that can help you to engage with and put into practice many healthy behaviors that can help you to be able to have a longer, satisfying, and happier life. Appreciate your attention, and we look forward to talking to you again next week. Thanks.